So, I know I say this a lot, but this piece of programming will change. Actually, okay, now this one probably won't change how you do programming forever, but it does give you a pretty invaluable tool for doing programming. And it's the concept of of a list. Now, some of you come from languages like Java or C++, and they'll tell you it's very much like the array list from Java, or even just the list parent class from Java. And for C++, perhaps more like a vector or something like that. The list is a very useful data type. It's basically, for those who come from maybe from one of those languages but aren't quite there at that level of advantage yet, the list in Python is an array that can grow or shrink. Now, for all of us who don't have computing experience, let's just talk about what a variable is first. Variables are letters or words that relate to a spot in memory. For instance, if I were to make a variable x and give it the value 17, it might look like that inside of the computer's memory. Some box in there labeled with that variable name with the value inside. In code, I could go ahead and write that out just as x equals 17. Now, upgrade my font a little there. Yeah, so that so far makes plenty of sense. We've done that so many times. But what we haven't done so many times is where we've done something like this. I'm going to show you the code for it first. It'd be something like x equals 17 to 3. What that would do is create something called a list, in which case this one variable now has multiple values inside of it. And I'm going to draw those as boxes. There we are. Okay, cool. Which basically then allows me to access any of those three values with this same variable. That if I were to say something like print strx of 2, we would get 3. But let's go ahead and look at that in code now. So we're going to shift out of just this basic theoretical background and then jump into code. So we'll fire up our idle and let's take a look. All right. So this is very similar to another concept that you've seen already. I'm going to use 1, 2, 3 to make it a little less complicated. And that really is the string indexes that we had before, right? So if I had a string, hello, and I printed out s at 3, you hopefully still remembered that it'd be at this L right here. Or if I were to do something like show 3 through 5, it's going to show 3 and 4 and ignore the last character, which is 5, which is off the screen anyway. Getting me the splicing of that string. Now, this is so similar to it because a string is basically just a list of characters. A string is named as character string, right? So it's one character strung with others. And that's also what we see with what a list is. A list can have things added onto it. It can have things printed out from it. For instance, if I were to print out the string version of x at 2, I'm hoping that you see that we get 3 right here. So I'll show you that right there. And there we are. Now, going from there, we can also talk about how to put on more things. Whereas with strings, we could plus equals, add on, a z or something. And we'll expand my splicing so we see it. You see how that z is now added on. We can do the same thing with lists by doing the append function. Notice how append works. Is that if I were to give it a number, and then I were to just print out x as a whole, printing out the entire list, we can see that there's a 6 here now, because that's what append does. Append just requires a piece of data, and then it gets put in to the list. Now there are a few other formulas I want to look at. X.reverse is another quick one. Just simply reverses the list as it is present currently. In fact, what I'll do is I'll remove all the string stuff, and I'll put various print statements for X as we change things about it. So for now, what we can see is we start off with a list of 1, 2, 3, then we have 1, 2, 3, 6, and then we reversed it so it's 6, 3, 2, 1. Now, before I go any further, let me go and make a few notes. This is what's called initialization. It's where we give a variable its initial value, its first value. In this case, we're giving it to an array, to a list. We will also see it done in a few other ways. I'll just put them in comments down here so we don't forget. See it done like that, like that, and like that. Alright, so for now, let's just go ahead and keep working with our list. Hopefully all this stuff makes sense to you so far. Now if that does, let's go ahead and just add on a little more. We'll append 7, and we'll append a -2, and then we'll go ahead and print out our list again. And notice that the change is just now 7 and -2 have been added to the end, as append would have you believe. Let's do another thing. Let's go ahead and grab x.sort. We'll print that out. And then we'll do x.insert. Print that out. And let's just cover how these two things work. Alright, so one thing I'm going to do before we go further is I'm going to put some statements in here to make it easier to read. So I'm going to add something in here like after sorting. Then concatenate those together. After inserting. And what I'll do is I'll actually, for this one, I'll say exactly what we did because I think it'll be better for us to learn from. Then I'll do x at 4 equals 2 and x at -1 equals 7. Because I want to make sure that you can really get a nice introduction to these negative indexes. So let's just go ahead and run that now, and let's see how the code works. Alright, so starting from the beginning. We start off with a list 1, 2, 3. Then we went ahead and appended a 6 to the end and then printed it out. After that, we did a reverse function, which then reversed the whole list. And notice, it's not just flipping the first and the last elements. It's moving it from 1, 2, 3, 6 to 6, 3, 2, 1. Okay, then we did a few more things at once. We did append 7 and append -2. So let me just easier to see. So I just wanted to make sure we had our thing all on the same screen. Alright, so anyways, yeah, so we appended a 7 and a -2 right to the end. And then we did this sort method that we hadn't explained yet. Now, sort method, what it does is it takes the whole, the list there and puts it into numerical order. If it is a list of numbers, it goes into least to greatest form, as you can see here, where we start with a -2 and then end with a +7. Everything else is exactly in order. We went from this confusing mess to this orderliness. So sorting will do that for numbers, least to greatest, and for strings it'll just go A through Z. Now, I'll let you know right now, it will go through capital letters A through Z, and then lowercase letters A through Z. The reason is due to the ASCII values of those letters. That does not show up on our first test, so you're probably okay. But I just want to let you know that that is a thing. Alright, so let's talk about this part. X.insert 2, 6. Alright, you'll notice what changes from sorting it to X.insert. Hopefully kind of quickly, you'll notice that that 6 wasn't there before. So notice how that went, and for this one I want to do this in paint. So notice how that went. The 6 wasn't there before, but it is at index 2, right? And that's what we have here. Insert is indeed done with this, with the first number being the index, and the second number or string being the element to put at that index. Once that element is put at that index, everything else is shifted downwards to the right. So if you'll notice, we didn't lose any data. Sorry. Insert, put a 6 in there. At this point, right there at 0, 1, 2, at that index, and then shifted everything else to the right. It did not delete any data, it just simply moved the rest of the data to the side. In effect, our list just grew. So when you see X.insert, make sure you have it at list and then element. List index and then element. Once you do that, that should work just fine. I will use it frequently on your quiz. All right. Let's grab the last part here. So this is just directly changing the list with indexes. Now I did just put a space in there. There's no real reason to need one. I just like it when everything lines up, and it does when I put a space there. So let's go ahead and notice how this one works. So these are the last actions of our program before it finishes. And let's look at how it works. First, x at 4 equals 2. Well, that then should mean that I should expect at index 4 there to be a 2, where there might not have been beforehand. Unlike insert, which just adds more data to the list, doing an assignment with an index will actually change the data, effectively destroying the old data that was there. So notice how this 3 is gone. There's no more 3 there. It destroys that data and replaces it with the new one, thus putting a 2 at index 4. That should probably be pretty quick for you to figure out. If I were to change this to 2, you could probably also get it, seeing that it's now going to be here that gets changed at 0, 1, 2. Notice the 6 that was up here is now a 2, rather than that 3 being changed into a 2. So that part probably makes sense to you. It's this -1 that's a little weird. And some of you are probably thinking, well, that was going to be an error, but it's not. For you programmers who come from languages other than Python, here is what a negative index is. What it means is it's 1 from the right. In fact, I might even say it's first from the right, just to make it very clear. As you can see, it takes that first element all the way there on the right and changes that one. And I could keep going with that. I could do this one to 76, this one to 75, and you'll notice how it just just keeps eating away at it from the right side of the list. You see, whereas left to right go from 0 through 1, the length minus 1, in this case 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, for a 7-number list, the negative indexes actually start at -1. This is because there's no -0. Technically there is a -0, but not for this instance. So anyway, yeah, so not having a -0, we start with a -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7. That you can actually use these indexes in such a way that if you'll notice that, let's say this 2 right here is 0, 1, 2, 3. It's at x at 3. That if I were to do x at 3 equals 99. Notice how I can change that one. But then I could also go back and do it from -4 from the opposite side and set it equal to 98 instead. And that's just whatever happens last is the final example, is the final, maybe not example, but the final value of that list. So those are negative indexes. I will use them. I will use positive and negative indexes, insert, sort, appends, all that stuff pretty frequently on the Python quizzes because I like to confuse you. No, not really. I do want to make sure that you understand this stuff and are able to walk through it. It is more direct than some of the other things we do. Like functions are not very direct. Those require you to move around from place to place. If statements, same thing. Iteration structures, when we get there, those ones as well. But lists are pretty straightforward. You do have to really step through it though. And I would highly recommend that anytime you're doing so, you do so with pen and paper. Because it's going to be nearly invaluable to you. In order to follow along. Now, I guess, technically, if you're really, really smart, you don't need to. But it would be a good idea to not give yourself any extra trouble with a test question. So that's just my 2 cents in the matter. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give just a couple of more things. We have this style, and then we have remove, sort with strings and numbers, which is just an error. And then we'll do the others. Alright, so I'm going to go to the top of the page. I'm going to put 3 single quotes in a row. Those are single quotes, notice. And I'm going to put those almost like bookends around the rest of our code. So that way it is now commented out. And we no longer have it. And that allows us that when we run it, it'll just not do any of that other stuff. And we will be able to just focus on what's happening down here. So let's go ahead and do that. Start off with this, and I'll print out X right there. Let me resize this window so it's not so covering our code. Alright, there we go. So we start off. 3 times 3 is not 9. Not when one of the 3's has a pair of brackets around it. When that happens, we end up with actually just a list of 3 3's. Or if I were to change this to maybe 5, then I would get 5 3's. Or I could do 5 2's. You notice how this works, right? Basically, just with the list times a number makes it that list that many times. Some of you use this in lab too, actually, with the pack of strings, in which you did that in order to print out your strings. Because if you were to print, let's see, if I had pi and I was just printing out y at 0 through 2 times 2, you should get that twice. So it's very much similar to that. If you didn't understand that, don't worry about it. But this is just another way of initializing a list, doing the list times a number, giving us that many elements of that list. Now then, this gives us a good field for learning about remove. Now removal is handled with the word remove, and then you give it a value. So if I were to say 2 for instance, it would remove a 2 from our list. Remove does not remove every single element from the list that meets that condition. It instead removes the very first one that meets that condition. How are we doing on time? Okay, that's a lot of time. Let's go and wrap this up. Alright, so notice how I can make those 5 2s, and then I can remove the first one. I can make it more obvious that that's what happened by doing something like this. X at 0 equals 1, and then doing it for a few of the others. There we go. You'll notice that when my list is not all 2s, perhaps it's a little easier to see how I remove the first 2, but not the second 2. Now if I want to remove the second 2, I would do x dot remove 2 yet again. And when I print that out, now we have no 2's left. And again, it's not going to index 2 because this has been index 2 each time, and it hasn't done anything to that number. But it does remove the other ones, and then shift everything else down to the left to fill in the spot. Now, if we do a remove 2 again, when there are no 2's in here, we do get an error. If the value cannot be found in the list, then it will be an error. So okay, lastly we'll get to sorting with numbers and strings, and we'll do it like this. One, I'll start with this one. I'll also put in the multi-line comment from earlier. The 3 single quotes around all those blocks, that way they don't run. We'll test what we got so far. So again, just multiplying a list by a number gets us that list however many times. And let's go ahead and do something weird and add in a string. Now adding in different data types is actually just fine. Python is okay with that. In fact, you can even have a truly insane list. For instance, if I made insane list, it could be something like this. This is mostly for you upper level programmers. 6, 2, 3. Notice how right there we have our first element is another list. Our second element is going to be the word hi. Our third element is going to be a list of a list of a list with just various pieces inside. And of course, if I were to print out something from this insane list, you could see that I could go, let's say I want to get that 2 right there. So it would be 0, 1, 2. Again, this is mostly for our upper level kids who have done programming before. Yes, that's element 2. Then I go in here to this first group. That's right there. So that's just a 0. And then, if I'm not making any mistakes, that's 0, 1, and then 1 to get inside that 2. Yeah, well, I probably made a mistake somewhere along the way. See if you can parse that one out. I'm going to go and remove it because it's really just a thought exercise. You wouldn't make something like that. Now, so far what we have is we have a list of numbers with one string at the end. Now, you know that if I don't have that string in there, you know that x.sort will result in a sorted list from least to greatest. However, if high is present there, we have two different data types, and we get an error for that. Python does not actually know how to sort between strings and numbers. Some of you do know that there are rules for sorting strings and numbers. A lot of Java programmers have probably encountered that. However, that is not used here, so you do not need to worry about it. But make sure you have it that you cannot sort strings and numbers in Python. Alright, then I go ahead and figure all that out. The last one is really just 2 lines I want to show you. I want to make sure that if you saw this right here, you would understand that's just an empty list. It's nothing scary or anything, it's just an empty list. Hopefully you'll add things to it, you know, x.append 6, x.append hello, x.append hello, but with a capital H. You know, and you can see how that works. It's just adding elements to that list. Yeah, so that's the last one I just want you to have. So if you have that third way of initialization, if you have, or fourth way, I suppose, if you have all this information in your head, which I know we lectured on it all last week, and we're doing some assignments with it. We did the nuclear silos, all that. Thank you for watching. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Good luck.